Let's talk about Miss Ella Marie Jalani Yealish O'Connor, aka Lorde. Wow, that was a mouthful. So if this pandemic has allowed me to do something with its multiple lockdowns, is to discover new music, discover new artists, and also just listen to artists that were already big but I never really took the chance to listen to. And one of them happens to be Lorde. With only 2 albums released in the past decade, I noticed how much she has had in the present and how much she has impacted the music industry in a deeply but subtle way. Just side note, like Pure Heroine and Melodrama are so good. You guys have to listen to it. Like, it's just, I fell in love with her with Melodrama, and I just restarted to listen to her basically, and that's why basically I noticed how she had such a big presence, but it was like kind of subtle because she's really not on social media or anything, but it really fits with her aesthetic and the persona that she is. So from the 2010s, we have seen a slow shift in the pop scene, and as we enter this new decade, we can say that popular music is usually soft, sad, nostalgic, and deep. And this is partly due to Lorde and how she helped popularize indie and alternative music. Of course, there's also the fact that trends come and go and that the music industry always is changing. Making her debut in 2012 with her single Royals, she very quickly topped the charts in the US and internationally, peaking at #1 in the Billboard US 100. Her songwriting was described as quote-unquote woke, rebellious, and real. Royal, her debut song, was basically a critique of luxury and how everybody wants to be famous, everybody wants to be rich and wealthy. It was really the opposite of what popular songs were singing about or what they were talking about, which at the time was unexpected from a 16-year-old, especially if we compare with the popular music and sound between 2009 to 2012. And we can notice the vivid contrast between Lorde's aesthetic and her critique and what was popular at the time. Just to refresh your memory, most successful artists at the time were Lady Gaga, Katy Perry, Taylor Swift, Rihanna, Nicki Minaj, Bruno Mars, the Black Eyed Peas, LMFAO. The pop scene sound could be described as lighthearted, bubblegum, electro, flashy, over-the-top, almost artificial. Basically, the pop industry was giving us party anthems, and here comes Lorde being the total opposite of that and criticizing this way of lifestyle that was promoted in Hollywood in their songs. Lorde topping the charts tells us 2 things. First, the cultural climate was changing and society craved a sound more soft, conscious, and simple. This is of course due to many social cultural factors, which have a big impact on trends, but also the music that we listen. Some of the issues that we faced and that we still have to face as millennials and Gen Zs are, to name a few, the economical downturn, the accelerated deterioration of the planet, the sudden increase of gun violence and terrorism. Even if we were not conscious or aware that this affected us, this still affected our social climate. Naturally, the songs that we were going to listen fitted that social climate, and Lorde was perfectly what we needed. On top of that, Lorde rose to fame at only 16, being one of the youngest artists to win a Grammy in the history of Grammys. And this brings us to our second point on what Lorde's quick success tells us. We have to notice that she was so young, and people were not used to see such a young person talk about this kind of things. With her presence, she showed that teenagers had something more to say and that they were worth being listened to, but she also allowed people in the pop stream music to normalize songs that were more deep, more sad, and more quote-unquote again woke. She then released her album Pure Heroine in 2013, which included Royals in it, and this album addressed teenage angst, romance, social classes. To quote the Wikipedia page, this album deals with themes of youth and critiques mainstream culture, exploring materialism, fame, consumer culture, and social status, classic teen pop themes such as social anxiety. And the reception of this album was very good. Many people were in awe of her complex songwriting. The melodies were very simple because she wanted the listeners to really focus on what she had to say. This album is very minimalistic. I would also like to add that and highlight this because this is just something that I love about her. She is a poet. As shown in Pure Heroine, she really takes the time and to write her songs and just be a poet first and then a singer. The climate in which Royals came out really was prone to make Lorde successful. In 2012, the movie Hunger Games was released in theaters. It was one of the biggest movies of that year. This movie was targeted to teenagers and young adults. I remember even watching this movie, I was about 11 or 12 years old. And just to refresh your memory a little bit, Hunger Games was basically a movie about a young girl who was 16 years old. So it's basically set in the dystopian world where you see that teenagers are going to lead a revolution. Basically, that's like the conclusion of the first movie. Not only Lorde, but the the entertainment industry was seeing that teenagers of that time and still now didn't dream of a bubblegum world like they did in the beginning of the 2000s. Now movies that were targeted to teenagers were more deep, sad, dramatic. And at the same time, we had The Fault in Our Stars coming out, Divergent, and all of the sick kid falling in love trope that I talked about in my last video. So all of these movies were being released and targeted to teenagers. Let's go back to Hunger Games. Hunger Games is basically if a Lorde song came to life, basically. So much so that for the third movie, Mockingjay Part 1, the producers of the movie asked Lorde to write a song for them, which is Yellow Flicker Beat, and another song that I don't remember the name, but we'll put here. The brand of Lorde fitted really well the Hunger Games, and so you can see that it was not only Lorde that was changing everything, but it just the climate, the social climate that was around in the entertainment industry noticed this. So everything that was targeted to teenagers started to perfectly fit the slow change that was happening in the entertainment industry. After her first album, indie and alternative music took a big place in Young's adult playlist. Only a few years later, in 2015, an artist by the name of Halsey released her debut album called The Badlands. Halsey was only 19, and as we listen to this album, we can clearly hear the influence of pure Heroine in it, not only because of the sound of it, but also it is alternative and the poetry in it. So Halsey identifies as a poet who writes music, just as Lorde. And a few years after Halsey, another young artist called Billie Eilish, I don't know if you know her, started to gain popularity. Slowly, the flashy, artificial bubblegum sound of the 2000s was over to let place to a more nostalgic and softer songs. Today, mainstream music is described as quote-unquote sad bangers. And to quote the NPR article, Lorde was trying to kill time, and instead she snatched the mic, became an unintentional spokesperson for the day's youth, and ushered in a sonic shift toward minimalist and dark pop. After a whole decade, we have to ask and state the obvious. With the amount of talent that she has, why hasn't she released more albums? So to answer your question, Lorde, identifying as a poet or writer, she takes the time to write her songs and to carefully choose the sound of her stories. This is basically the main reason of why we only had 2 albums released in a decade. Nonetheless, her 2 albums were a commercial success and both prove her influence and the musical genius that she is. So I don't really worry about her because I know that when she'll make her comeback, people are going to be there to listen to what she has to say, because at this point, my girl Lorde has a lot of things to say about this pandemic, about the social climate with BLM, with Asian hate and racism. There's a ton of stuff to talk about. Let me know what you guys think, what you think will be the future of the music, who will be a new artist that will maybe change or shift the music industry. I think that for now, things have been the same for a few years. Billie Eilish is at the top, if not at her peak at this moment. Also, Taylor Swift released a folklore album and very alternative sound with her 2 last albums. So let me know, comment down below. I don't know what I'll be talking about next time. Maybe body hair. I don't know. Okay, bye. Love you. Have a nice day.